This game sucks. Okay, I'm kidding. But all jokes aside, I don't think anyone would argue that Call of Duty has seen a lot better days. So what made me point the finger at this game? This game is really beloved. Most people cite it as the best COD ever. The multiplayer is really beloved. The zombies mode was the best it had ever been, up till that point. And the campaign delivered a really memorable story. I would argue all of those things are actually in support of my claim that Black Ops 2 is what killed COD. So join me on this, sorry. Join me on this little journey as we find out why Black Ops 2 is the sole reason for killing Call of Duty. Let's take a little bit of a trip back to before Black Ops 2 came out. Like I said before, it's the sequel to one of the highest selling Call of Duties of all time, which was the original Black Ops. And the original Black Ops had a campaign that is still one of the most beloved campaigns to date. I mean, in my personal opinion, it's the best campaign. I know a lot of people argue that Modern Warfare 2 has the best campaign, and I'll give you that, but Black Ops 1 is just leagues above any other story mode at the time. And people who know me personally know that I really dig the zombies mode in all Call of Duty games, and this one was where it really got its identity. I mean, when people think zombies, a lot of people's first thoughts are Kino der Toten, which was the on-disc map from Black Ops 1. And then, of course, we can't forget the multiplayer, which at this point, COD had about a 5-year streak of breakout multiplayer modes that took the world by storm. And needless to say, the hype was real. This had a lot to live up to. Modern Warfare 2 was an amazing sequel, and MW3 was not too bad. COD had had a pretty hot streak, and Black Ops 2 was out to do some pretty bold things. So, did it deliver? Well, when you look at the stats, as of recording this video, Black Ops 2 is the 7th highest selling Call of Duty of all time, selling 29 million copies. So, yeah, it delivered. The campaign is still remembered fondly to this day. I mean, it's a great continuation of the first Black Ops. It brings back all the same characters that everyone loved. They even knew that Black Ops 2 being set in the future would be kind of a risky setting for them, so they kept half the game in the past. Multiplayer was also a massive success. It introduced the innovative Pick 10 system, which allowed you to mix and match any parts of your creative class as you saw fit. You were no longer required to pick a primary weapon, a secondary weapon, lethal and tactical grenades. You could swap all that out for a ton of perks and have a tomahawk and a combat knife to play ninja with. Not only that, but at the time, this was the most balanced / patched Call of Duty in history. I guess leaning more on the side of just most patched Call of Duty. The MSMC pretty much dominated competitive play for a while. It was great for casual players who wanted to have quick fun, but it was also great for competitive players with the new League Play mode. I mean, this mode is still talked about to this day. Despite trying to revive it a few times, COD has not even come close to really replicating this since. And Zombies mode was reaching new heights in popularity, even though they fumbled the launch pretty hard with their new innovative transit. Lava, boss, and jet gun. At least Treyarch had the foresight to add smaller survival maps to hold off the player base before newer and better maps came out through DLC. And each one of those DLC maps really pushed the bar and kept trying to innovate. Some worked, some didn't. Kind of looking at you, Mob of the Dead. Okay, sue me. I don't like Mob of the Dead, okay? I'm not really a big fan of Mob of the Dead. I love the atmosphere. Gameplay aside, the story was hitting a peak as well. An even higher peak than the end of Black Ops 1 with the moon map. Easter eggs started to make zombies feel like its own experience and even its own game instead of just a bonus arcade mode like it was in World at War and Black Ops 1. Looking at broad strokes of things, the campaign seemed to hit the mark that it was supposed to. The multiplayer continued a long streak of insane popularity, and the zombies mode was continuing to grow. So how the f did this game kill COD again? Okay. I know. It's an awesome game. I love this game. Personally, my favorite COD. But we do kind of have to look at some of the stuff that Black Ops 2 was the first for in the Call of Duty franchise. Black Ops 2 introduced a lot of things that hadn't been in COD before, and looking down the line a little bit, some of these things kind of panned out in a pretty negative way. In fact, a lot of the things that were introduced into Black Ops 2 ended up being huge pain points for COD players later down the line, and ended up being the reason why players would leave the game. In retrospect, Activision may have taken BO2's success in the wrong way, and in turn, the studios developing COD going forward continue to pursue successful aspects of Black Ops 2 and taking them too far in a direction that the audience ultimately would learn to hate. The first of which being a future setting. I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with other Call of Duty fans about the games that were set in the future and how much they hated the jetpacks, or they hated the advanced movement, or hated laser weapons. Like, back in my day, like, shut up. These games were good. Objectively speaking, these games were good. I mean, people liked Titanfall. How is that any different? Matter of fact, the people who made Titanfall also made some of the old Call of Duties. Another thing Black Ops 2 introduced was a campaign that had branching paths / choices. You know, it was the first step towards complicated storytelling, which we'll get into later, and kind of a departure from realism. The Black Ops 2 multiplayer was the first to ever add a DLC weapon, and the first to ever add, am I allowed to say this? Microtransactions. Outside of map packs, of course. And it was also in these microtransactions where we got our first set of camos that were kind of over the top, cartoony, and not really realistic. I mean, up until this point, Call of Duty was still kind of seen as a gritty war sim. And then lastly, on the zombies front, this was the first time that Easter eggs became a lot bigger than just Easter eggs. Hell, that was like the main focus of the zombies mode now. I remember a lot of the community on YouTube at the time were just making content doing Easter eggs and new discoveries about the story. It was no longer just a side mode to see what round you could make it to. Granted, that subset of the community still existed, but story was more of a focus over fun. Now, when you start to really look at these points and think about it, you begin to see the pieces fall into place, and how the games that came after Black Ops 2 followed these innovations in a kind of destructive way. I mean, let's just start with Ghosts, right? The game that came immediately after Black Ops 2. The multiplayer leaned a lot heavier into microtransactions, with, from what I remember, DLC weapons coming with almost every DLC map pack, and a lot of other cosmetic and other types of microtransactions introduced to the game. I mean, do you guys remember when Snoop Dogg was just all of a sudden an in-game announcer?
Squad member acting. That's what's up.
It's weird. Like, what? Who asked for that? And back to the DLC weapons, a lot of them were kind of seen as pay to win. I mean, I know anyone who played Call of Duty Ghosts multiplayer at the time is familiar with the Ripper, and if you couldn't afford the DLC as a kid, you learned to hate this weapon. Now, the campaign kept it pretty similar to what we were familiar with for Black Ops 2, but it is worth noting that this was the first time that we had gone to space. And speaking of space, we got a very story-heavy alien mode that replaced the zombies in this game. Now, I remember at the time, because of a lot of these introductions, Ghosts wasn't seen as a very good Call of Duty. In fact, this was kind of the first hiccup from what I remember. But okay, things aren't too bad. I mean, Ghosts still performed well enough, and people were pretty excited for what was next, which was Advanced Warfare. Yeah, this one's gonna be a doozy. I don't think I even really have to say how this one leaned heavy into Black Ops 2 innovations. You know, microtransactions were pretty much the name of the game here. This was the first time that we saw supply drops. Also, the multiplayer introduced weapon variants, which is the definition of pay to win. The best way to get these weapon variants was to get them in supply drops, which you could earn in-game, but it was a lot easier to just buy them. And I was one of the players that did buy a lot of supply drops. I've spent an embarrassing amount of my allowance as a kid on supply drops, and still didn't even get any of the weapons that I was after. No Obsidian Steed, no Inferno, no RIP. How did I spend so much money and didn't get those weapons? The setting of this game was far into the future. This was the first game that introduced an advanced movement system. So no longer boots on the ground and run around like a normal army soldier. No, there was jetpacks. And granted, at the time of Black Ops 2 launching, I don't know if anyone really made that much of a stink of it being kind of in the future, but this game definitely had its fair share of critics. Hell, I even had friends that said that they wouldn't even play COD until it went back to modern day or even back to World War II. And then with the zombies mode, it had a pretty unapologetic story focus and began to lack in the gameplay front. This was the first time that the zombies mode really had harsh critics. I mean, you can count Transit and Die Rise, but I don't really know. Those maps were still a lot of fun with friends in a so bad it's good kind of way. Exo Zombies is just bad, pretty much all across the board. But hey, you know, Advanced Warfare came and went, and actually I'm looking at my schedule here, and in the dev cycle, Treyarch is back up, and they're the ones who developed Black Ops 2, and that was a hit. So what do they have in store next? Oh, I don't even know why I asked. This game was either a love it or hate it. Personally, I loved it. The campaign is pretty universally panned for being way too complicated though. All the characters that made the Black Ops games memorable were no longer here. And to me personally, the missions felt way too futuristic to the point of not even feeling like a COD game anymore. I remember maybe 1 or 2 moments of the entire campaign, and not because they were epic or fun, but because they were just memeable.
Train go boom.
But moving on from campaign, the multiplayer was plagued heavy with microtransactions and pay-to-win weapons. Although not in the weapon variants kind of way like Advanced Warfare, but in the DLC weapons kind of way like Call of Duty Ghosts. Except with Ghost, at least you had the option to just pay $15 and you had the weapon. With Black Ops 3, you'd have to pay $500 and not get anything! Despite this, I feel like a lot of people gave this game a pass because the devs tended to stay on top of the balancing and kept the playing field level for the most part. I mean, this was the first year that I really paid attention to the competitive scene for Call of Duty, and I didn't see a weapon unused. This was easily the most diverse meta for any Call of Duty competitive scene. And then, of course, touching on the futuristic setting, this game's advanced movement system was definitely a lot more complex and layered than Advanced Warfare. No longer was it just bunny hopping around. There was actually a fully controllable thrust pack and wall running and sliding and the whole bit. Now, moving on to zombies, this was definitely the strongest mode of the game, and I don't think very many people are going to argue that. Although it's still at its flaws. It would eventually set a standard so high that even the devs behind the game couldn't top it in future titles. The story was a heavy forefront in this mode now. Gameplay was strong too, but also plagued with microtransactions. And the scare factor is pretty much entirely gone at this point. They tried their thing with Zetsubo no Shima. It just wasn't the same, man. You go try to play Noct in World at War by yourself with the lights off and tell me you don't get scared. But yeah, overall, Black Ops 3 wasn't really that much of a hiccup, besides the campaign. Multiplayer in Zombies was strong enough to where people had a lot of faith in the next COD. Oh, well, okay, maybe not. So, the next Call of Duty is obviously Infinite Warfare, and yeah, this is easily one of the most hated Call of Duties of all time. The campaign feels like a sci-fi story than a military story. Battles were taking place in low gravity and on different planets, and half the weapons on the roster were laser weapons. The multiplayer meta is completely hijacked by weapon variants. Supply drops give you weapons that are not only pay to win, but also grant more XP. So you're not only killing enemies faster, but you're leveling up faster. How the fuck did this get made? Zombies leans way too heavily into story and is overall pretty uninteresting. The launch map was a lot of fun, but the quality seems to have a pretty drastic decline with DLC, and Zombies was no longer that much of a casual experience. Hell, I don't even know how to turn power on in most of these maps. This was the game where the scary tone of Zombies was pretty much gone. Zombies fully embraced a comedic tone. Now I hear you saying Black Ops 1 and World at War also have their goofy moments. I mean, the characters are always cracking jokes. But this was used more as a contrast to the scary environment as opposed to an entirely comedic and silly setting. But yeah, from this point on, Call of Duty really started to feel the repercussions of Black Ops 2's success. Each Call of Duty game after Infinite Warfare felt like damage control. Each game seemed to fix one thing but continue to forget what made the franchise so enjoyable and memorable in the first place. World War II got rid of weapon variants and bragged about their realism with the marketing, only to be one of the most least accurate CODs in history. Rather than going back to a system that worked in the past, the devs tried reinventing the whole lobby and matchmaking system, which at the time was kind of cool, but looking back on it, was really unnecessary and probably resulted in the general lack of content that there was in the game. I mean, how are you gonna launch a multiplayer mode with only 9 maps? And 2 of them were unplayable. This game really sucked in retrospect. And then Black Ops 4 got rid of campaign entirely, presumably after hearing the backlash from BO3 and Infinite Warfare. Multiplayer seemed to try and emulate popular hero shooters that were popular at the time. Zombies was too complicated for its own good and forced a premature ending to their long-running story. And then Blackout was introduced in hopes to breathe new life into the franchise as it continues to battle an identity crisis. Now, granted, Blackout was pretty fun, and honestly, I prefer it over Warzone, but it doesn't really support my point, so I'm gonna brush over it. Okay, so those were a handful of games that preceded Black Ops 2, but is there any hope for Call of Duty moving forward? Well, yes, but they're on pretty thin ice. Starting with Modern Warfare 2019, it seems like things might start turning around. They completely revamped and rebuilt their engine. They gave a soft reboot to beloved campaign characters from the Modern Warfare series, and they took a long-deserved break from zombies. All of Modern Warfare's momentum seemed to stop pretty quickly. I mean, we have Black Ops Cold War that came out the year after, which was okay. I'm a huge Black Ops series fan, even a fan of Black Ops 4 to a certain regard, but Black Ops Cold War just did not do it for me. It lacked a lot of the character and energy that the Black Ops series had up to that point. And then of course, Call of Duty Vanguard came after that, which was easily the worst Call of Duty that I've never played before. And then after that, we got Modern Warfare 2, which the marketing did a pretty good job into making us think that this was going to be Modern Warfare 2019 all over again, but as soon as the players played it, we realized this was nothing new. And because nothing new sold so well, they made nothing new again. Following that, Treyarch put out Black Ops... Am I reading that right? Which had all the hype in the world. This had people convinced that COD was back. Like, back. Me included. The beta went over pretty well. The launch went over pretty well. People were digging the new Zombies map. The multiplayer was serviceable. And hey, there wasn't a bunch of weird BS that just didn't fit the time. Well, okay. Yeah, so that didn't last very long. And as of recording this, Black Ops 7 just came out. And it's alright. I skimmed quickly over Black Ops 6, but that's because its problems and Black Ops 7's problems, and most likely Call of Duty's problems moving forward, are kind of the same. Black Ops 6 had a lot of controversy with AI, art, even replacing voice actors with AI. And with companies like DICE and EA listening to fans when it comes to their newest game, Battlefield 6, it put the pressure on Activision. So Activision released a few statements before Black Ops 7's release, saying that a lot of that futuristic stuff is staying in the past. Skill-based matchmaking is staying in the past, kind of. And overall, they're trying to make it seem like they're listening to the fans now. But in all honesty, it's beginning to look like the Call of Duty that we once played and enjoyed doesn't exist anymore. Now, do people still enjoy Call of Duty? Yes, of course. But it's a new era. What do you think? Do you think Call of Duty could make a comeback? Or will Black Ops 2 forever be known as the game that killed COD? Like and subscribe to find out.